When you draw, you can go the places you've never been.
Good evening, everyone. It's a real privilege to welcome Peter Rich to our campus today. Peter Rich is not just an architect; he's a storyteller who draws with extraordinary sensitivity. His Johannesburg-based practice, Peter Rich Architects, is internationally celebrated for its work across museums, cultural centers, housing, and sustainable neighborhoods. In 2009, his Mapungubwe might be the wrong pronunciation, Interpretation Center was awarded the World Building of the Year. And in 2018, his hand-drawn works, which is going to show today, were exhibited in the Venice Biennale of Architecture in 2018. A rare honor that speaks volumes about the depth and originality of his work. With his projects in US, UK, Rwanda, India and China, Peter Rich Architects is committed to designing with, not for communities, championing African architecture and homegrown ideas as powerful forces shaping contemporary, inclusive and context-driven design. His architecture emerges from listening, observing and drawing. For Peter Rich, drawing is not simply a representation of an idea, it's a way of seeing, connecting deeply with people and places, of discovering what architecture can become. Over the next hour and a half, he will take us on a journey through his sketches, moments captured from travels, encounters and experiences. I hope this session opens up for for drawing, what drawing can do beyond and drafting board. Drawing as carriers of embodied experience. If this talk doesn't awaken the urge for you to draw, perhaps nothing ever will. Perhaps, please join me in warmly welcome Peter Rich for this talk.
Right, it's wonderful to be in this space, designed by Prashant and Majanath. It's my third visit. This is one of my favorite architecture schools anywhere in the world. It's very different to CEPT, but there's a harmony, there's a coming together, there's something special that happens here. You've only got to listen to Majanath giving a lecture about the type of engineer he is, and then the type of person Prashant is, to realize, I don't think you students here actually realize what a glorious, understated piece of work it is. There's just a tranquility and a calmness. And it's just beyond belief that one's standing here in the courtyard. And what the Vadia School has come to mean a lot. As you know, I had Bhumika intern with me for 3 months. She's become a daughter. And she brought her Southern Brahmin food and kitchen with her and taught us a thing or two. And she's since gone on to Seattle and got 100% for all her subjects. Okay, so it speaks volumes for the school. But it's a special place, the Vadia School. I'm linked, fortunately, to the Care School. I'm on the board of Avani. There's now the Seed School. There's Vadia. And there's the C School. Those are the sort of 5 schools, and with Avani that have generated a sort of 10-year, last decade period of trying to actually bring architecture back into the teaching, into the domain, and it's fantastic. I came to India in 2012, invited by Ruturaj Parikh, who's just organized Frame, to the 361 conference, to find that I was speaking after Charles' career. So I had to raise the bar of what I was talking about. I had the reverence of meeting him in the anteroom before we spoke, which was fantastic. And then on the way to that, from the hotel to that venue, the 2 last people to get onto the bus was Doshi and myself. And we had a conversation, and that changed my life. And then he invited me to CEPT, and I ran a course with Neil Kanthchai and Manali Nanavati and Shubhra Rajay, and entered what Rahul Malhotra calls the Indian architectural jungle, and have never regretted it. I've come back to be replenished time and time again. Because, and then recently I did that article in the Plan magazine where I wrote as a curator, I wrote the piece on building on the shoulders of the past and gift exchange. and Nandan Balsavar wrote a more critical piece at the end. Read those two because they deal with the old values and the new values, okay? And it also looks at reinventing Indian heritage. So I've been entirely enriched by it. So today Doshi talks about architecture being storytelling, and he talks about it being about life. So I'm going to take you on a journey, and I'm going to share a number of stories with you. We're going to go into the cosmic realm of cosmic representation in ancient cultures, and then I'll show you my cosmic representation. And recently, when he invited me to Goa about authoring and to draw, it sort of completed the circle. I don't know if this is advancing. And he chose these drawings I did at the mill owners as part of my poster. Okay, I'm going backwards. Now I need to go forwards. And I'm curious. I immerse myself in the situation. I live in the present. And to draw on which is one biography of space and place. Okay? I think what's important here is being curious. The best philosophy is the one that comes out of the situation and living in the present. Okay? Very important. Don't know why this isn't. And I'm going to start off by talking about gurus. Okay? Standing on the shoulders of the past in Africa, India, and in Europe. Now, my guru was Pancho Guedes. He's Portuguese, originally from Oporto, but trained in Johannesburg. Peter Cook said he's the most creative person he's ever met. And he happened to be my surrogate father. In 1964, okay, I was in first year. I eloped with the woman who was going to be my wife to Mozambique. You know, it was a bit like having Mexico next door. You ran away there. And met Pancho. And he changed my life because he opened my eyes to Africa, contemporary artists, and the wonderment that was Africa, and launched a whole career for me. And he wrote a manifesto, I claim for architects the rights and liberties that painters and poets have held for so long. And when he phones me up, he says, how are your drawings? Because he knows if the drawings are okay, the poetics of inquiry through drawing accounts for a better architecture. Or how's your paintings? That's one of his buildings, The Habitable Woman, and these are examples of his work. His work's going to be exhibited at the Centre Pompidou in the world. They've been in sort of, they've been under a period. They had a major exhibition in Lisbon before his death, but they're about to be released to the world. And he was very important to me. He also became the head of our school for 15 years, and everyone who trained in that school, and he brought Elder Van Eyck, he brought the Smithsons, he brought the people who were part of Team 10 with him to teach us, and everyone who was in that school, staff or student, unbeknown to them, went 300% beyond their known potential, which is a fantastic thing to do. I'm not sure if I'm advancing this. And then there's Doshi. Pancho died in 2015, and I met Doshi in 2012. Okay? And Doshi wrote the foreword to my book, and he said, Peter Rich experiences the joy of architecture through his spontaneous sketches and drawings. Influenced by his mentor, Pancho Guedes, he uses drawing as an organic expression, seeking to understand and experience reality through his sketches. A drawing can imbibe impressions and memories. An architect can also draw more precisely to understand scale, proportion, light, quality, space, and volume, and Peter explores both of these methods of drawing intuitively. And then Johanni Pallasma. I sent a series of 10 drawings that were done for Triple ID for an exhibition that's moving from Hyderabad now to Bangalore a few weeks before I came here. And I sent them to Johanni, who's now just turned 90. Johanni's been writing for 10 hours a day, and having turned 90, he's starting to lose his short-term memory. Okay? So I keep friendly with him, and I'm going to share his letter in 3 different phases to you that he responded. Now, He's the author of The Eyes of the Skin, The Thinking Hand, The Working Hand, The Music Hand, Your Embodiment in Architecture, Architecture of Neuroscience, proving with some Italians that 90 to 95% of what you do is intuitive. And those of you who are part of social media and Generation Z or X or Y or Z who are always having to multitask, give yourself some time to access and open the doors to your intuition, because you need to open the doors. They can be blocked by too much information. And the experience of space in your lifetime, from your first memories when you were 3.5 to here, are not in the library of your computer, and neither is your access to intuition. And through the brain that's in your hand, you can access that library. So there's a number of intelligences. There's natural intelligence, there's intuitive intelligence, there's now artificial intelligence, but there are many intelligences, and you need to actually have them at your fingertips. And the 10 drawings I'm going to share with you, the IID landscape, okay, it had to do with roofs. So the first roof I started with was this one. In this compelling sketch-based narrative, I reflect on 10 roof structures across the globe, drawing connection between cultural heritage, material ingenuity, and spatial meaning. From Macintosh's tartan grid in the Glasgow to the sacred geometry of Humpy and the expressive vaults of South Africa, I explore how roofs can both be technical solutions as well as poetic gestures. This is a drawing I did. I was one of the last people in the Glasgow library before the first fire. It's a reconstructed drawing in studio from a rough drawing that was done. But most importantly is this drawing. Walking into Macintosh's library at the Glasgow Art School is like entering a carefully composed piece of music, each element placed with intention, each silence holding meaning. The roofs are the first thing that speak. It's timber grid drawing your eyes upward as if inviting thought to rise. But it's not just a ceiling, it's a quiet order that holds the room together, giving shape to the air and the rhythm and the light. This is Macintosh's genius. The library, a perfect cube in plan, is anything but static. A three-sided gallery wraps around suspended space with place allowing for section to do more and for defining the mood. Here, plan and section compose and generate the other meanings. And notice it's a drawing where here's the section of the main space with the subspaces. Here's a breakdown of the tartan grid that starts, and if you take it through different levels, you start understanding. And this beam that pulls out 50 years before Neutra, showed us what to do with his houses that he did in America, and the plastic quality of plywood that goes around. And then this isn't a high-rise building, it's a lamp. So I've been imploring a lot of students here, Presti, in final year, to actually understand the underlying geometry that's behind what you're doing and the proportioning system that's behind what you're doing. And then if Glasgow reveals light and timber and the structure breathing life into symmetry, Westridge House, which is where I live in Johannesburg, explores how movement makes space come alive. And this was through, as a precedent, learning from having experienced the lessons I learned from the realm plan of Adolf Lewis. And I'm saying to students, especially in final year, when you choose precedent studies, show why you chose them and what you learned from them and how you reinterpreted what you learned from them in a different way, and it's added meaningfulness to your life. Beneath a wide pillar and roof, space shifts and spirals. Drawings from Lewis's realm plan and African spatial thinking. Downstand beams sketch out on a tartan grid. Structural and ceremonial. Rooms unfold in rhythm. Thresholds dissolve into landscape, and the house feels like a composition and more like a lived story. And then in Rana and China, the roof becomes a terrain, an undulating canopy of laminated bamboo that echoes the foothills beyond. Its structural members rotate gently along a central beam, balancing load and lyricism, drawing inspiration from Gaudi, Le Corbusier at Kem's Niffer with his customs house, and Gabi Fagan in Cape Town in the 1960s, who saw the house, the Gaudi building school next to the Sagrada Familia. The design honors simplicity, care, and craft. The result is a shelter that feels grown from the ground and rests on it. And then, closer to home, Stone becomes atmosphere. Carved ceiling filters like leaves through a canopy. And it's got to do with darkness. Doshi always asks, where's the darkness? And where's the light in the darkness? And I've been trying to draw the light in the darkness. And also the importance of the soffit. When you're in your studios, look up and look at the rhythm of the castellated triangular beams on the top floor that form the rhythm. Look at the rhythm of the offset columns that are here. Architecture is about the grammar of architecture. It's about scale, it's about proportion, it's about rhythm, it's about color. Those are the grammar which with you talk architecture. And you've got it, the ancients understood it incredibly. And further south, among the ruins of Hampi, a modest structure reveals profound meaning, a square within a square centered around a framed edicule. An edicule is a space within a space. It's a Greek word, speaks of the ancestral and unseen. Short timber bearers radiate outwards, echoing the chatra, a geometry of memory, belief, and a metaphysical held in form. And then this is Chaya and his beautiful retreat house, which I will deal with in far more detail later in the lecture. Okay? Near Ahmedabad, a quiet platform rests above a water tank sheltered in a sloped roof that gathers the monsoon. I'll talk about this later. And then this same reference shapes the Mazvi Voices for Women Center, where soaring timber vaults rise lightly from each built form. Minimal means yet full of presence. The vaults are both protective and expressive. They give form and resilience to the strength of the voices long held in silence. That space houses 2,000 embroideries taken by Afrikaans male artist across a full cross-section of South African society, where women have expressed how they've overcome trauma in their life, be it domestic violence or political. Okay, and it's a beautiful archive of that. It was to be built. We had the government money, but the government money was corrupt, and we withdrew the money, but it'll get built in some other form. And then on the ridge near Kruger Park, a white line interpretation center stands between sky and memory, rooted in the Verse Pisces, the eye of the sky, which is two intersecting circles, which is a sacred geometry, okay, opens to the center of the sun, the rain, flanking butterfly roof shrouds sacred darknesses and light, turning shadow into evocations of silence and presence. And in hazy view, the salmon sea is space for truth-telling and transformation. Okay? And then lastly, Ronchamp Lekowitz's chapel hovers in contradiction. You're sketching, you're trying to get a composition, you shift your composition, okay? You do that one, then you do this one, and the little one you do is actually the most successful one, talking about light. And the way the roof actually, just that sliver of light, the way the roof floats. Okay, so you've got this gravitas coming down, but at the same time there's ambiguity, it floats. India travel sketches. This is near Aleppi. It's two trees that form a temple. And I was so overcome, I was new to India, and I tried to draw the thickness of prayer. That's what I was trying to draw, quite honestly and openly, when I drew it. And I had pen and ink, so how do you draw prayer? Okay? You engage in the moment. And it's not a moment of just sight, it's a moment of smell, it's a moment of taste. It's all the phenomenological senses. And then the melting wax that occurs. Now you've got a book that's like this. Do you draw a sliver or do you do a landscape? And how does the sliver, with the tangled branches of the tree and the metalwork that's symbolic that comes into it, how do you capture it? And then when do you know? One of the things we'll be dealing with here is when do you know when to stop with a drawing? Okay, when's it finished? And then further evocations of Varangal that we looked at earlier. I'm trying to unpack the geometry that's there, and trying to unpack also the nature of the representations of flowers and nature, and then the base of that building. So sometimes you can just draw that base and give it some scale, and that with shadow is a very evocative memory. And then you also do this little drawing, and you suddenly realize that the ancients had seismic. They had to deal with seismic, so they had this prefabricated architecture. Seismic isn't a new thing. It existed then and there. And then when you go inside, you actually cross, this is amazing, you almost can walk in here. You cross the threshold. And that's what we need. A lot of the schemes in the school are dealing with at the point where you need to cross thresholds of entry. You've got them all in your culture, okay? And then when you get in, just the hovering of that light with the light source from the front door, I mean, you've got, I don't care where you come from in the world, you're in a very sacred space. And when you move around these temples, a framed space. And in here, maybe the drawing's enough. You just got a bit of sky and you've got that. When's the drawing finished? You're being called to the bus. Let me do a last-minute sketch. Because when I'm in these places at my age, you're thinking that you probably will never, ever have another moment to get back here. So you need to draw. And an idicule of space in an open space at Trishi. Okay? For me, this drawing's finished. I've noted where the shadows are. I could go home and do more rendering. I might do that as a trace over. And then, trying to understand a culture that's not yours. The lingam, 2/3 of it is underneath the ground, and then it's based in this thing, and it's ordered in this way. You're trying to get understanding. And then you go to Kumbatua and you climb the hill, and you see this lion, and then you see the progression of these across space. And then what it does is it terminates, and then what you do is you very quickly draw the plan, and there's your national bird, which in this case is deified, going out to this element, and then there's a change of direction. So just the axial changes of direction, the complexity of that, and the divine ordering of it. And when you drew this, somehow drawing the texture of the wall had to do with the borrowed light that was coming in. Each of these are like design decisions. And then I happened to have the chance up in the Nilgrini Hills to go with a retired general from your national army on a walk and meet these people. And I was intrigued because we have a cattle culture in Africa. These are not cattle, they're buffalo. But there's a buyer here. There's a sacredness. And the drawing that I did when I was this, because it started raining. And you can't draw when it rains, and I didn't have an umbrella. But I went home and I redid this drawing. So what I did is the drawing became a narrative. I brought the oxen, I brought the animals in, and then I started to unpack the moon and the stars and the horns and the different ways in which people give expression to their cosmic position in the world. And I did some other drawings, and then I did a drawing from the back where the priest who's assigned to the particular thing is the custodian, and then it started raining. So I have this memory, but this type of drawing is an illustration of what happened then. I'll show you the difference. And then these are drawings done at the Temple of the Sea south of Chennai. I can never pronounce the name. But when I got there, it was this sort of, had been weathered by the sea and weathered by the elements. And when I started drawing, we were stopped by the disempowered security guard to say we're not allowed to draw. So I left the students to engage with him and threatened to send things viral. And then I was an Olympic athlete. I sprinted 150 meters and I did a drawing. And then when he chased me, I sprinted another 150 meters. So these are like 30 seconds. And somehow they captured the molten quality perfectly. These are the sort of drawings I was saying we should do in the market this morning, okay? It is so, there was that memory of that. And then back into the darkness. And Doshi and Varki and Nandan Balsava, all worked on the IIM in Bangalore. And they learned the lessons were all here, And then recently I was at Udaipur and I was drawing, and then there were these pilgrims going down, and then I was informed that you need permission to draw, so I stopped. But it's okay. I went outside and then I did this cobbled entranceway, which brings you up to there, and then it brings you to there. Okay? So I have a much fonder memory of this than you do when you just click a camera, because I've actually gone and revisited this just through drawing in 101 ways. And then thresholds of entry, okay, rhythms of gracefulness and different geometries that are inspired by shells and pieces from nature and the beauty of a circle on something. So, and it's very, you observing, but you can draw an analytical drawing of the plan because it takes very little to do that. And what it does is it actually helps you articulate what you're drawing. So plan and section are central to what you're doing. And so what I've been saying to students, plan is the relationship of many things, okay? And plan should be beautiful. The section is the generator of space and form. And they're the fundamentals. And then this is a kund. And I could put the water in and I could draw the reflection in, but it's enough. The memory is there. And this was a wonderful man who was over 100, who started a university. I was sent there by Lejoy Remy way back in 2016, and I went up to the sacred space. Obviously, this is the picture I've just shown you here is a reconstruction of me trying to draw a section through that experience at the top of that thing with water and something in the corner. And then, this is on the way to Bangalore, and I believe we're going to visit it again. I stopped with Bhumika, and there's the temple on the top of the hill, and it's a very nervous little sketch done quickly. And then when we got there, I did these quick sketches, and then we walked around, and then this is the composition I loved, and I want to go back here and maybe I should put the water in here because it frames the view. Composition's got a lot to do with things. The book I've got here is the book on composition and construction of R.M. Schindler, how you compose something. And you're all going to get into that with your final presentations. And this is when Cookie took me to the temple on the way to the Bangalore airport. And I walked around and then just chose this one. And somehow it tells you so much, that idea that you've actually got a square column and you just chamfer the ends and you get this repeat thing, you get the darkness, you get the relationship to the hill. If the hill doesn't quite line up, you can make it line up because you're an artist, and it improves the composition. And then this business of the sacred, this is a temple that gets submerged when the monsoons, it is full, and when the monsoon subsides, it's near Tungi. You actually discover this, and it's got a lot of the guano from the birds on it, but it's gone dark. And it's magical because you've got almost like these chess pieces which float off, and then you can pick up that there is the alignments are there, but certain things have gone out of alignment, and there's the Tungi fort. Okay? So it just becomes absolutely one of your fondest memories of that visit. And then we go to the outskirts of Ellora Caves, and I'm interested in the idea of implied diagonal. And here it's given fantastic expression because not only do you have this enclosure, but you have these pavilions that pick up that idea. And I've got some oblique views of it. And then the section confirms it. And there's a very nice balance that actually happens. And it gives you an idea of scale. And then when I get to Ellora, I'm just blown away. And again here, I draw sliver after sliver on my moleskin of that cut and the element of darkness. And I'm torn between, do I do this long drawing with the elephants or do I do that drawing? And you do both of them. And then your time's up. So which drawing do you choose to do? And in Tricia, I thought these dolmens and things were part of what Vikings and Scotsmen did in the northern UK or in Brittany, and I didn't know that it was part of your culture, but you're much older than those cultures anyway. So it was a revelation for me to find these structures in India when Leroy Remy in my early 2012, on my first visit, took me here. And then more recently, I've been to these graveyards in Udaipur, and this is a drawing I did just 2 weeks ago. the beautiful idea of the chatra, I hope I've spelt it right, I've probably got the plural wrong, but this idea of celebrating your ancestors by having a plinth, a multiple plinth, and then 4 or 8 or 6 columns, depending what it is, with this umbrella that's usually inspired by nature, and then that holds within it the souls of your ancestors. And then I saw it happening. I saw people with babies, they'd got married. You bring that person to your ancestors to say thank you. And if you come from a Christian or other thing, it's just the most beautiful way of giving reverence. And then you start looking at the details. And I'll get into an animist culture a little bit later, the important part that flowers play. And then, the human spirit at Golconda, meeting forts, meeting the rawness of nature, and the two interacting with one another. Okay? And there's a sort of visceral, raw quality which expresses itself in a number of ways, and I'm sure through geological things has got unearthed at a point in time. And the tomb of the poet who's on a raised era, and then this shows you that when you actually splay a corner, you get this rhythm of light, and it's very poetic. Something you can also see at Humpy, but I took that out of the lecture because it was getting too long. And he was imprisoned here and wrote some of his favorite poetry. But forget about that narrative. That's not the narrative. I was there because the alternating light source, at Golconda, the poet's jail, was something that I wanted to draw and see that I could capture it because it raised the spirit. And then the Buddhists, the solidness of this. And, where do you start drawing? There's the memories of these former structures. And then while you're waiting, there's these pilgrims walk past, and it becomes one of your favorite drawings because it's just a little doodle you do. But it's enough. But it needed the sky. Okay? And we do that with our architecture. How do you nuance what you do? And then this one, which is a lower area, it needed the paving, it needed that because intuitively you felt it needed that, so that's good enough. Okay? Doesn't need to have a rationale behind it. And then Mandu, I've had a love affair with Mandu, and Bharath Ramarutharam, the amazing photographers, asked my sketches to be part of a book he's doing. And what's captivated me there is the representation of what's female and what's male in the perfume pools. Now, these are sketches. That's done in the studio. It's a narrative, a piece of narrative reconstruction of the concubine in the pool with the servant. And I'm trying to relive that moment. And then there's the masculineness of the stripped down mixture of Afghan and other architectures. And then you measure them, 6'6", and what's the height of that to get an idea of scale. And then the beautiful room, which has got these almond-shaped windows, which are feminine, which slope and gather the light in the most beautiful way. So you need a plan, you need a section, and you need to see how the two talk to one another around an eye. And then you take a walk around, and you discover other rhythms, the hall without the roof on, and the business of silhouette. And how do you compose it in the morning light? Okay? With an element of foreground, background, and why do you do this hatching? Because it throws it forward, so you develop a bit of technique. But it's never representing what you see. You're trying to actually capture, I'm trying to capture the spirit of place. It's almost like a karmic thing. It's much deeper than just, and good art is something that makes you see what nobody else has seen. That's where it takes you. And these beautiful platforms that go down, and is this where the elephants entered the water, or is it where the concubines entered the water? And when you turn around, you find there's a whole route there. It could have been elephants, but like ruins, they evoke your imagination, and that's what's important. And then some more allegorical works. the perfume, the eye, the sun, the mythology. And then I had to phone JK in Trivandrum and say, hey, do you guys have mermaids in your culture? I'm sure you do. And he said, put one in anyway, okay? So it needed a mermaid's tail. But this is an actual detail from that particular thing, which I've reconstructed. And then these perfume pools. This one's the length of Olympic swimming, okay? So they were really fit. And then how you arrange people around a lotus flower. And now I'm in India and I've got lotus flowers. And then I go to China and I've got lotus flowers. And then I'm a Christian, so we kill the dragon. I go to China and they rever the dragon. And it's lovely to actually have these ambiguities and paradoxes that exist. And if you draw this and you're drawing a sliver, you can unfold it because you can show the construction of that. And then these are two of my favorite spaces. This is the Kund of light, and then there's the Kund of darkness. And this is taken from those steps, and that is taken from up there. And what it's begging me to do, I'm itching to do it, is to do the section through here that looks at this elevation. I've got to do that when I get home or my soul will not be healed. And then you go to the Kund of darkness, and Dvij Hepara is a graduate of SEPT, recent graduate, and he pitches up and you tell him, go and get the key to get into this door down below and don't return not saying you can't get in, we have to get in. And they open the door and the bats fly out. And the only way to get water is from the top. And if you see the section through this, Sept have drawn it, and so is Nirav Hepara from Vododara. They've drawn 1 in 50 details. It's like a Ledoux building, okay? It's just totally blows your mind. So I've got to actually get the section out. And then you visit the mausoleums, and the mausoleums are amazing, especially the ones that have water in front of them. And you try and reconstruct that water. And this is a drawing redone in the office. It's got a little bit stiff, okay? But you know that, but you're doing it for yourself. You're not doing it for marks. But you've learnt about the asymmetries that exist. And then another drawing done quickly from the one side. And then you walk further up, okay? And while you're over here, at 6 in the morning, you put your iPhone down. It's bright apple green. And you go down to write the name of the temple so you can get it right. When you come back, your iPhone's gone. Okay? Now, I know the monkeys took it, and I haven't had any phone calls yet. But I reported to the police, and the police are really neat. You know, they don't have big fat tummies. They're neat, and their shirts are pressed and everything, and they've got this neat thing. And they said, sir, the only crime we have in Mandu is teenage boys looking at another boy's girlfriend, and we have to resolve that scuffle. And they said, we'll go and ask the tribals. And then I'm 2 days later, I'm giving a lecture in indoor to 2,500 people outdoors of Triple ID, and the lecture stops, and the commandant of police comes along with the same policeman, and they present me with an iPhone 13 to say we're sorry. Paradox of India. Okay? The same place. And then that beautiful palace, there's actually a lovely drawing by Rajay, the architect, of this particular plan. And it's actually quite interesting because the way you enter it, I'm quite sure Lutyens actually went and did a lot of walkabouts because he learnt a lot of his mannerist ways of entering a building. You don't enter into this court. You turn right, you then enter there, you then come through a narrow space and you enter. And then there's Ramputi right up on the hill, okay? And when you get into it, this is a very quick drawing. This is what I want you to do with your projects. Have a look. You're going into a perfect square. It's got steps in this position. It's got an implied diagonal. It's got an expression given over there. You come from a thinner court through a narrow space into a bigger court. This has got an axis that goes through with a balcony, but just that opening over there is a gives you a completely different expression and experience. And then this is my reconstruction of that palace in relation to Ramputi's palace, built for the love of his life, who looked over the Gulf, Arabian Gulf in the distance, and the geological relationship of the one with the landscape to the other. And then an attempt to draw that plan, and an attempt to draw that plan, with this outer size being smaller than that size, with the stairs that come up and you enter it like that. So suddenly, drawings are always analytical. They're not just recording one thing, they can be recording another. And then the approach that you have, the quick, nervous sketch, the other sketch with the horse's place. I'm missing the walkthrough to the other side, but when you get there, there's this change of direction when you get up. And then when you get on top, there's this incredible view. And I drew this trying to draw, you've got vision, and then you've got extended vision. And I realized that if I was going to draw it, I had to move the whole thing, which is, I think it's 6 columns. The eye had to move outside of it. And then these two go very well together, because it has to do with, the spirit in the shadows, the business of darkness that Doshi talks about. And then Badami, I've got a more extensive lecture on Badami, but you draw the way the gats meet the water, and then you realize that if you pull yourself back and you get a little bit of foreground, you've got a much better composition than you had there. That's what you do. And then we befriend these people at Telkota. This is what I like about the present project in third year, and we should consider doing something like this as a future project at this school, because this family befriended us. And it's a young family with children who've occupied Granny's home in a historical context, respected what she did, and yet they lead a good life. And then I was this JK from Trivandrum, and I said, while I'm busy here, can you go and draw the public space, because it has to do with the street. And these are the measured drawings we did. I did this drawing of this one. There are the measurements. There's the cow coming inside, the roof terrace, there's that. And then we went back and we drew it properly at home. And this is Granny's house. Okay, motorbikes go in here now, but this is where the sleeping is, or sleeping room here. Dining, there's the tulsi plant in front over here. There's a threshold of entry. There's this beautiful design structures. There's a living room here, a bedroom there, a cooking area here. And then what the children did is they roofed this area, they increased that bedroom, they made this living and dining. They put the puja in and they altered this. They put a internal staircase, an external staircase, and a room upstairs with a terrace. And there's a very nice integration between contemporary living and heritage in a very meaningful way. So we thought it was worthwhile actually documenting it. And we went this morning to the old town, and it's quite interesting to see how people can adapt. A modern generation can adapt to an older generation. And we spoke about changes of level. You go into the town and all of these changes of levels. These changes of levels, I've got it in another lecture I might show later in the week. We worked with Field and Clegg and Bradley, a London-based firm of 300 people. 3 of us helped them win a competition. And I was trying to say to the British that, if you're building on a slope, if you take the 700 here and you actually go to Kannada in Bangalore and look how you have half levels, you can end up with a 1.5 meter retaining wall instead of a 3.5 meter retaining wall. And you need to take these beautiful thresholds how do you take the good manners that were implicit in the older cultures and bring them into modern design? Then let's look at contemporary architecture. I had a very short visit. The caretaker at the Sarabhai house made it quite clear that you had 15 minutes. So I wanted a drawing looking along the vaults, and I wanted a drawing looking across the vaults. And then I went outside, and I did these drawings. And if you don't do the drawing, you don't have a memory. You do the drawing, you have a memory. And all of the scratching you can do on the aeroplane anyway, if you've noticed where the sun comes from. And some of these drawings you draw and you think, oh God, I'm drawing badly today. And then 3 years later you look at it and you think, oh my God, this is such a beautiful drawing. Who drew it? Okay? That's also okay. And then recently, usually I'm such awe that I get paralyzed and I get goose pimples, but I was in the mill owners and I managed to finally be composed enough to realize there's light coming from two different sources. There's the grid that runs underneath. There's the plasticity of space, and there's the nuanced, but there's the spiritual upliftment that you have. And so I did a series of drawings while I was there, and I had the time to think about doing the drawing. And then I wanted to draw the staircase and how the staircase stops short over there. All the lessons you can learn. Absolutely amazing. And then when I went into this space, it's so clever because he's got cheap plywood, which he's put at an angle, which actually adds to the rotation of the plan. That's the stage. And when you enter here, the wall comes past, and there's an opening in the wall, which enables you to pause to see who's lecturing, and you can leave. And then I built the section into the plan, and then suddenly went up on the roof. And then I realized that that's where someone coming in can pause, either enter or leave. And then so I did a drawing that reconstructed that, okay? And then there's this way of doing a window, which I'm sure affected how Khan thought about the Elfric house, which has got that language in it. So you start making connections across one culture to another culture. And then the contentious hand that he gave you, and you do rough drawings of it. Then you do some stiff drawings, too self-conscious, okay? And then you're entering into the darkness. You're finding the darkness in the architecture. It's certainly in there, and it's amazing. And then I like these rough drawings because you're waiting for someone, and you're just doing a quick doodle, and it somehow captures the moment just perfectly. And then a more finished drawing, which you put more time into. So, drawing just becomes it becomes my form of meditation in a way. And then Doshi, walking a group of students intercept. Just pausing, drawing the plan, stopping again, looking at what's the ordering system that's at work, what's the musical rhythm to that score. You get down, you turn the corner, you look up the space, and then you look across the space, okay? And then you say to Ruhu Mohotra, when you did the new building over there, you should have got the beat of the new students' quarters to be the same rhythm and broken the rhythm at that space. And he says, yeah, you're right. And then that amazing staircase, which deals with darkness, okay? These were supposed to be worked on and have more darkness put into it. But if you want to understand Doshi's idea of where's the darkness, go in and around those amazing staircases, and you can get the experience. It actually is one of the most wonderful architectural experiences. And then you get the very different geometry of the Gupta. And how do you draw that? This is the quick drawing you do. That's the more developed drawing you do. And then when Doshi takes you for a walk, and he loved the garden. I was there once when the gardener was drunk, and he said, it's okay, he's my friend, leave him alone. And the gardener died shortly after he did, and the garden went to rack and ruin. The gardener was a very important part of the story. And it's all part of storytelling. And then there's that very intimate space you go into where Doshi takes you to his office. You go up here now to Kushnu's office, and you go through there to Rajit's office. But these are all memories, but they're done in situ. And there's something about doing it in situ which has to do with the phenomenological, the smell of the place. And then chaya. This is incorrectly spelt. My intern is an African. He doesn't know Chinese. It's meant to be an A, but we'll correct it. And chaya takes you to his center and tells you it's a quick visit. And he says it's really just changes of level and repeating the same element. We had a beautiful scheme today that did that so well. So he's talking about it's a journey. There's growth involved, and there's repetitive elements. Okay? And it's the center of the environment. And then we visit Chaya's retreat house out at Alu on the outskirts of, it's so typically Chaya. You arrive, and there's this wall, and there's a door, and there's this raised area, and he greets his staff, and there's a little frilly petticoat of roof that sticks out here. And then you go closer and you find these two things meet, and they're quite crudely built. And you grab the handrail and you go down. And then when you turn, you're actually confronted with a meditation room and a platform and a chair and nature. Okay? So it's a completely synthesis with nature. And you do a quick drawing on one of your visits. And then he said, we built this to meditate, but we never go in here because we just sit here because we're looking into an embankment of growth. We're not looking at the river. And because you're looking into nature, you can determine your own horizon, which is part of your karma or where your thoughts are at that time. And then he has this idea of dappled light and the fact that if he used some leftover marble from a job, and it reflects these trees over here, which creates another nuance. And then he's got this minimalist balustrade, you know. The Britishers and the Australians and the Americans can stay at home because it doesn't comply with health and safety regulations, and it doesn't need to. Okay? And you're actually sitting on a water tank with a sloping roof that gathers the water and contemplating nature. Okay? And then when you take another view from the other side, he also sits in children's chairs, which brings his level right down. And you're absolutely calm, and you're just looking into an embankment of foliage. Then I wanted to understand the internal space, and then I found there's this beautiful chair, and really the space is a reconstruction of that chair, and how that tree becomes like, and it's quite nice in the film called Sketching Chai, which we watched which was released. The premiere was released. It's 65 minutes, and Chai's sitting, and he happens to have a tree in the background coming out the top of his head. Beautifully composed by the cameraman. I think it might have been coincidental. And then I slept in the guest room, and this is the way you rise up in the morning. It's a very special piece of heaven, and I want to go and do Uday and Mosami's house because it's another one of these modest houses that's so important. And then in any school of architecture, and you know who they are in this school of architecture, and one of them is the maker of the space, Prashant. They're these guys. You know, except there was Varki, very important. Work under Varki, and he structures how you frame a project before you hand it out and what the outcomes should be. But they're these guys. There's Lou Pereira and there's Kiran Pandey. They were the practitioners who were always there. They didn't write refereed articles. They weren't going to do any of that stuff. But they the heart pump that actually teach the grammar of language. So I asked to go and visit them because I visited their houses, and suddenly I could see where Sudha Reddy said, when I interned there, it changed my life. I can see certain architects like K. Dungavala and other people showed me this is the way he used borrowed light, this is the way Doshi was doing it in his house, how they were all learning from one another. Excuse me, I went past that a bit fast. And then I visited Kiranpande, and I realized the borrowed light that comes down the wall here, which you see so beautifully in Cookie's office, a similar idea, but used so beautifully. And now we're going to move to Africa. Okay. South of the Sahara, Africa has traditionally been a cattle culture. You don't kill an ox, you bless it and you bleed it the way the Muslims kill an animal. It's an integral, it's your wealth. And wives for cattle. When you want to marry a girl, her worth is so many cattle. Okay, and there's a transaction that happens before money. But people who lived in settlements like this is one family's name. You people know about incremental families, go beyond nuclear families. It was a spiritual experience to live here because you had a sense of belonging. And what we're trying to do is you want belonging, you want to see a contemporary home with belonging, go and see what Anita and Vinod did from Good Earth in Calicut. Go and see the 32 families that live around a 1-acre courtyard. And you'll find it's got a sense of belonging because the social space that's between the parking and where you come in works. We need to bring that back. That's the human factor. But this is how people used to live in Africa. They've lost this now. Okay? I'm one of the few architects in Southern Africa that went and documented it before the iniquities of apartheid got to it, which smashes the social system and then introduces a religious thing to seal the deal. And when I go into these communities, I go with a measuring tape. I don't go as the professor. I don't go as the architect. I go just as an ordinary person to say, I've come to learn from you. Now, they've never been spoken to like that before. And what I do is I document the furniture. I work with the grannies, and I work with the mothers, and I work with the children, and I triangulate. That's 600 meters across in order to learn. Okay? And I'm now doing a seminal book on placemaking in Africa, okay, which uses these precedent studies. And then it shows how I've used these precedent studies to my own contemporary work, or the lessons from them, the good manners from them, okay? And then this is a narrative sheet. This is a young tribal matriarch, a young girl, bare-breasted, coming out like a chrysalis that turns into a butterfly to be before her community, because she's now become this beautiful thing, which is the bearer and carrier of life, okay? And through dressing, she understands axiality, bilateral symmetry, everything that's implicit in there. And these illiterate women, it's as though they had Palladio's Quattro Libri next to them. And I'm the person who's documented their culture before it got into turmoil. That's an allegorical work I'll talk about, and I'll talk about the other things. And then it's influenced my own work. This is a house that I did. This is incremental growth. This is my own house. And this is the allegorical work. It's the house is the plan is in my mind. I'm seated on the seat, ancient seat of my ancestors, which goes through to the crocodile, which goes through to the water. I'm related to the fertility doll, which is related to the phallic symbol, and I'm part of a cattle culture. And I'm also part of defensible space, okay? And down my back, I've got beadwork, so when I walk, it rustles, and it's worn by my sister-in-law at my marriage because it has to do with fertility. So you're a country that's got ritual after ritual after ritual. This is a different way of an African culture expressing something very similar. But the first generation African students who are taught architecture, they said, we're now in our mid-50s, but we're Christians. But something's missing. It's our African past. And they actually want that back, as buried as it is. And my studies of these cultures, this is the place of the men. The man's the hunter-gatherer. He looks after the cattle. He guards the entrance. This is the place of woman. He has to defer to go into the womb of the woman. Woman's ritual takes place there, men's ritual takes place here, and men's ritual takes place to the mother, who's an Old Testament figure. Okay? And men are actually dressed in garb that acknowledges the feminine component. All the complications we have with gender today are dealt with in these ancient cultures and dealt with dignity. Okay? It's not a new thing. It's been around forever. And there's an agreement between the two wives as to who has hip ends, who has gable ends. These are the firstborn children. That's the firstborn son. This is a daughter who showed that she had Sangoma qualities and wanted to enter the divine. So she's given. So when you walk into a settlement, it's absolutely explicit as to who's who, and also which is woman's domain, which is men's domain. And it's not hierarchical. Although it's patriarchal, it's actually the women hold up the sky. And then we go to Mali. We're doing an exhibition in Arkansas, Arizona, and Yale next year. We're busy curating this. The spiritual connection with nature, integration and interconnectedness. The theory of holism was developed by a South African, Jan Christian Smuts, in 1928. He also wrote the League of Nations, which became the United Nations Charter. And when Britain was at war, Winston Churchill said, "My former enemy is the one who will handle the NATO forces. He's one of the great people of the 20th century." Okay? From the moment of having seen the first one of your drawings on my first visit to South Africa, we're back to the letter which Johanni sent me. I have admired your drawings, and I've deeply regretted that I could not accompany you and other good friends on your journey to Bandiagara. It was Wendell Burnett, Rick Joy, Tom Kundig, and Marlon Blackwell. They were emerging young American architects who were my friends. We invited Kenneth Frampton and him, but their respective partners said they're in their mid-80s and we think it's a bit too much for them. I could make only the 3 quick drawings of the Bandiagara Canyon and the Dogon villages there because the sun was unbearably hot. Although I entered in the canyon and sunrose, I sent one of my sketches with a letter to a birthday gift to Dawn Utson in 2008, just before he passed away in November that year. Okay, let's move on. So I'm walking the Bandiagara, 127 kilometers of the cliff face. I don't speak French. It's 1998. I've had to give money to someone and then go 800 kilometers, all on faith. I've got Marcel Griol's book in English, and I'm trying to unpack what is the world system of these incredible people that Elder van Eck wrote about in 67. Now, I'm in first year in 64. I meet Pancho Guedes. The Architecture Without Architects is published at MoMA in the same year, and Elder van Eck writes about the Dogon, and the cosmic aspect gets tested in his children's playgrounds in 67. So I'm part of that. That's where, and then the Beatles came out with Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Heart Club Band. That's who I was when I was a kid like you. And he's explaining that the winnowing basket turned upside down has 8 platforms to heaven. And it's represented in the granary, and this is the female granary, and there's a male granary as well. And the corners of this have to do with wild animals, vegetables, and insects, and this has to do with men and fish. And the tread of a stair is female. So suddenly I realize, coming out of my upbringing with mainly Jews, although I was confirmed as a Christian, there's a whole other culture here, and you need to be respectful of what it is. And then he goes, and I was trying to see how that's applied. You can see those are the female granaries, and where's the male granary? This is a male granary, this is a female granary. And so and it's the animus doctor, it's the house of a doctor, okay? So you're trying to come respectfully to grips with what this is, and at the same time, these are quite crude. The women hold up the sky, and they've got the sun under them, but they've also got the womb, and they've got the fetus, and they've got the perfume, and they're part of the heavens. And I'm alone in the desert, trying to make sense of this what this French anthropologist has spoken about. And you've got the Niger River, and you've got certain typologies. And you've got the Bandiagara Plateau with certain typologies. And you've got the cliff dwellers, and you get buried in the cliffs, and the vultures take your eyes and your heart to heaven. And then you've got the people on the screen, and then you've got those people, and you're trying to actually see what is their cosmic representation to the world. And the cliff dwellers are there. Okay? And then following in Alder van Eck's footsteps, the anthropomorphism of this plan. Okay, these are drawings of my son who was with me. Those are my drawings on that side. And then the Taguna, the fact that when you meet under this pile of reeds, and you can't stand up, so you can't be cross. Be quite good to put Trump in there. And you realize the beauty of that, because that's where the elders meet. Okay? So suddenly there's social space. And you're trying to get meaning out of what you're doing. And also, it wasn't just, Henry Moore and Picasso who reinvented themselves through seeing how Africans reconfigured the human form. Okay? I think also, you mustn't forget, Alder van Eck was going to Siam at the time. Martinson from South Africa, who was an absolute genius, was visiting at the time when they were trying to reconfigure the grand plan of Le Corbusier, was visiting Pompeii. And I own this sculpture, but it's just how you reconfigure what that human form is as a different way of seeing. And then you enter into a sacred landscape, and you realize that under animist culture, trees, insects, birds, mountains, hillsides are beings that can have impact in their animism on your life as a human being, and you're just part of a bigger thing. Whether you're a cliff dweller in the dust, or whether you are someone else who's living at this level, whether you're a baobab tree or you're an anthill, that is on an equal footing as you, which is very different from a Christian construct. Okay? And one's trying to have reverence for it. And that these mountains, they can actually talk to you. And also when you're in Australia and you actually go to a landmass, you say, old fella, you talk to it, because the Aborigines are from that same animist background. And you can see the snake. You can see the snake in the hillside. So we were having a discussion, my son and I, as to if we had to talk. And of course, you try and see which figure does that particular thing done. Then you go to the river dwellers, and you've got this horizontal landscape with shadows. Okay? And you enter here, and you're with 19 other people, and only you and your son are drawing. They're all taking pictures, and they're calling you to the bus, but you have to pause because you're in a place that's so beautiful, and you have to somehow record it. And then when you get into these mud cities, I think also the modernists actually learned from this, not just from the art, okay? And the internal courtyards and the labyrinths and those inner worlds. And then the city dwellers, this is a drawing of that little drawing at the bottom here, with someone walking in that corridor. Okay, 97, that's when it was, okay? And here you enter the domain of this man who's the mayor of the town, because you're waiting for a school from France that's coming to help you measure up Jenny. And you suddenly realize when you walk in these cities, this here is where you go at first floor and you urinate and wash your body, and it drains down the wall. And then you go to another one where you defecate, and it stacks up, and then when the monsoons and the floods come, you kick the bottom and it goes out with the river to fertilize. So it's an above ground long drop. Okay? They've resolved the issue of that. And I put your homage to Tony Garnier and Le Corbusier, because you're suddenly in this beautiful landscape made of two materials, and there's like homogeneity, and there's a search for a utopian ideal, rightly or wrongly, and it's magnificent. And then you draw a mosque, which is like a ant mound, and you can't quite work it out, and then your son goes and draws the surrounding area in a very synergetic way with you to give you better understanding, and these inner courts and outer courts. And this takes very little time. 5 meters by 5 meters by 6 meters, an 8-meter frontage. You do this drawing, you do that drawing, you do a quick 3D. This is what I'm wanting some of you students to do with your present project. Instead of getting caught up on a piece of cardboard, you can do this in 30 seconds. And the darkness that exists. And then you take a little bit more time and you look at the music score that does it, and you see where the music score changes and what the darkness is like inside. It's all trying to, through what Corp says, through drawing, observing, gaining a deeper understanding. And then in conclusion, Venice. These remarkable architects, Yvonne Farrell and Shelley McNamara, okay, they were the curators in 2018. There was an unbelievable intelligence. They said to me, Peter, the visceral nature of your drawings becomes your architecture. We've chosen you as 71 out of 280 people we were considering, and we want you to exhibit your drawings, okay? And my son and I were coming out of China, and as you know, there's no WhatsApp and there's no Google or email, and our phones went ping, 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 and we said, oh my God, Yvonne and Shelley want by tomorrow, what is the construct of your work? And that's what I'm asking the final years. What's the construct of your work? And my son said to me, hello, Dad. You know, he's not asking for a project. He's grabbing you by the scruff of your neck and saying, what is the crux of your work about? So we phoned my son, Rob, who's very intuitive, and he said, Dad, it's easy. The one lot of your work, which is axial, symmetry, duality, frontality, informed by the human body, you coined the word, a house is not a home unless it's a village. And you've done your exhibition that way. You designed houses informed by that, 3 independent pavilions opened at the corner. You've got the incremental growth that happens over here. And the other one is the organic informed by nature's order. Now notice it's not just this, it's not look more, no hands. There's an order in nature. So what's the underlying maths? And Yvonne and Shelley said, we want that one. Okay? And then I was sitting on the aeroplane coming down Africa. They then gave us a site. It was 7 meters by 7 meters in the arsenal, by 7 meters high. And I did this curvy-wurvy thing, and I gave it to them, and they said, no ways. You don't do the curvy-wurvy thing. You must get back to your drawings. So I went back to the anthropomorphic. This is the plan. This is low. These are screens which are done like that. And they said there's a window at 3.8 meters above the canal. And if you can use that light and pay reverence to the space, because it's an 18th century space, we think it'll be wonderful. So we chose a south light because it's there. And these are sections through 2 different places. That's when you walk along. We were this one. And they said, now what we can do, we can go to China next door who want a second story. And because the upper part of yours is showing a whole lot of your organic schemes which are translucent, it can justify that. Okay? This is the only slide. Here's the Chinese one. You can experience all of these dancing with one another. And they're on an orthogonal grid, and the whole thing hangs. And because we were in Italy, we know the Italians, when they work in heritage, when you put the new and the old, you separate it. And you know there's a way you detail it. So we detailed it with great love and took it on the aircraft and assembled it. Okay? And they said, we're not allowing you to write loads of gibberish, which architects write. We allowed one sentence of so many words. And one of them was, when you draw, you can go the places you've never been. And we're going to put that, it's going to be on a little stand that's half this height with your name. This is not a trade fair. And we're also going to heal the Venice Biennale because 20 different exhibitions with the art world and architecture world, they've blocked the lymph glands, they've blocked views through to 2 canals. We're going to heal it. And then my first drawing was a documentation of a 2,000-year-old settlement which was occupied as a palimpsest by Jackson Lungwani, a shaman, where he put a Christian construct over it. And here are the Trinity with the temple of, the altar of God, which is the altar of woman, the altar of Christ, which is the altar of men, and he's got Christ's office. And then I went to China, just inside. Everything else was Africa. When I'm in China, I draw like a Chinese person because I'm trying to respond to a sensibility of foliage and roof. And this became the site of a building we did. And then I did this drawing, and this has got built. These guys are nuts. You show them something, it's an idea, and they say, me like and me build. Okay? And then there's Mapungubwe, 80% less carbon footprint than a normal building. None of the decisions are made consciously by fashion or style. They're all made by how do you take the compression forces of nature to the ground. Okay, and then other examples in northern Tigray, where a Coptic woman climbs up a cliff face and gets her baby baptized closer to God. How do you build in that valley that's not intrusive? And then my own house in Johannesburg, which is a combination of my African space making and Adolf Loos's Raumplan and the orthogonal meeting the organic. And then this is the drawing that got me invited. I showed this in Dublin, and it was seen by, I'll just hold this, it's fine. It was seen by Grafton, and I had to do a place for First Nation Khoisan people who are now the Griquas, and their prophet was buried over there. We've got a holiday house over there, and it's built in A-grade fynbos on a quarry. And to do that, I went and got involved with this geology, and out of it came the fish. And that became the building. And this is a drawing of a seagull flying at 32 meters above level. And then these people were to become the custodians of a whole new conservation trail. And it never got built. And this is the Women's Center I spoke about earlier. And the drawings above. And these are the rough drawings. You're talking about woman. Is it the egg that gets representative? You're talking about an ambulatory around the bottom of that cairn. So these are the thinking drawings, which is a whole nother lecture, the drawings you use that are in between what you sketched and that inform what you do in your building, which is what I'm wanting the final years to do. Don't just do precedents. Do a drawing that shows what idea you took and how you changed it. And then these are the ones that dance with one another. And then the second message was I draw as part of a search to try and find a way. Okay? And then, almost in conclusion, allegorical drawings, a story with symbolic hidden meaning. This one I've explained. This one is our view from our bedroom. My wife and I have been married 62 years. This is the wedding gift we were given. It usually has daisies floating in it at the front door. This is my nose and eye. This is her nose and eye. We Pisces at opposite ends of the Piscean. She's 28th of February, I'm 20th of March with fish flying. This is Jackson Lungwani, who's Africa's great sculpture. He's our Michelangelo, God with the world. There's the angel Gabriel. Okay. There's the giving hand and the receiving hand. There's Ra, the Egyptian sun god, 25th of December, the resurrection. We won the thematic master plan for Axum, the oldest city south of the Sahara. We had the Coptics, you had the Jews, and you had the Muslims, all borrowing and stealing text from one another. Very interesting. And the sun god, the cattle culture, and then the rip you can see from the top of my site, which is the Magaliesberg, which is 1,000 times older than the Himalayas. And then this is the view the other way, which I've just completed. There's the house, which is an addition, the bowl from India, which gathers the water from the Kiwich, the site. the plan of the house with the implied diagonal where I was born, 2 kilometers away, the mining land, the feminine principle of the 5 remarkable women, grandmothers, mothers, and wives that I've had in my life, and where we were, the one move we made from the place I was born to there before we moved here, and then the gasworks, which is a piece of industrial archaeology. So allegorical works are different to narrative works because they're more symbolic. They're trying to encompass something that is of a symbolism nature. And I think these will come paintings. They'll probably follow in the footsteps of the sort of paintings that Doshi did. And my friend, this is the closing piece of Yohani. Please prepare a comprehensive thematic-sized book of your drawings. The students around the world who are uncritically made to believe in the virtues of computer design and the horrifying perspectives of AI surely need it. So that was a sort of message given to Rutaraj, who can fly the flag. And then just in conclusion, I'll go back to the mythological work, a house of mine. The colonial house, we built a building in the driveway, and that to define a forecourt. We added on diagonal extensions to define an inner court, another court, and then we've actually started to build a village. And in final conclusion, after I've had breakfast every day, I walk 96 steps. Uday and Musami Andare of Indigo say there's a text in Sanskrit that says you need to walk 100 steps. I do it after every meal. A house in Africa is not a home unless it is a village. A lot of the work we were dealing with the class of semester 5 today, we're dealing with just that, as did Charles Jenks. And when I get to the top, I turn northeast, and I talk to Kuke, I talk to Chaya, I talk to Deganan Balsava, I talk to Tony, I talk to all of you, I talk to my Indian friends, and I do a yoga session, then I go downstairs. So you're in my thoughts most of the time. Namaste. Thank you.
Like I said in the beginning, thank you, Peter, for this wonderful talk. If this lecture is not going to make you draw, nothing else will. Yeah? So I hope 1.5 hours of drawings will convince you that. To keep the presentation short, we'll take exactly 3 questions. Yeah, preferably from students. If students don't ask, I'll ask faculty to ask. But only 3 questions, then we can conclude a long day.
Sir, how do you know when to stop drawing?
I'm just a girl who can't say no. I don't know where to stop. I don't know what answer to give you. There's a time and a place. I mean, most of these are travel sketches. Another lecture is the drawings you do that inform your design work. That's what the book will be about, places I've got 2 books. One is Places of Reconciliation, which is community work. It's on top of the book I've already got. And then there's Placemaking in Africa. And I've given a young African who's 40, who went through the rites of passage of circumcision, and he went through the rites of passage of visiting his ancestors, and then did his PhD. And he now believes that Pancho and me are actually where the clues to an African architecture lies. And when I go to schools of architecture in South Africa, I've got black students that have got a lot of my plans on the back of their phones, and they're sort of acknowledging that, yes, you the carrier of the knowledge, let's get together again, okay? So I don't know if that answers your question. For me, drawing is like a meditative state. It's always something that puts me in a good frame of mind. It's just nice to engage with the present in a sharp and very acute way. And you're doing it for memory, you're doing it for analysis, you're not doing it for reason, you're doing it to try and see the world in a better way. I hope that answers your question. Okay, who's next?
I would like to ask a question about why there is only monochrome color used in your sketches and there is no any dual tone or many colors used in your sketches.
I've started doing oil painting, and I've got the colored drawings are in pastel.
Okay.
When I took Bijoy Ramchandran, recently to South African. I presented him with pastels and no ink. And he sort of paused. He said, no, I need to draw an ink first. So it's a good question. It's just got to do with ease of traveling. I hope in the next few days. Quite a good exercise. I do it with my sons. We take a tray of pastels and we go into the mountains when we're on holiday. We stop the car, put the pastels on the bonnet of the car, and then about 5 of us taking from the same tray, we say we've got 20 minutes. And we draw pieces of landscape. Some of us zoom in, some of us do it, and then we spray them, and then we go on and we stop again. And after 3 days, we get home, we're seeing our wives in pixels. You know, you see the whole world in colors. It's quite nice to indulge. It's quite nice to change your medium now and then, but it's also quite comforting to have the pen. And the thing with ink, it's not like pencil. Pencil you can rub out. Once you draw with ink, you can't rub out, so it forces you to commit yourself, okay? But don't, by all means, I mean, God, we've got a sketch group, we've got Dana, we've got Devu, we've got, you know, Cherian, we've got the most amazing Indian sketching groups of different generations that have emerged on the sketching group. And some of them don't realize that they're actually formidable artists. They're not just a bunch of architects just sketching. Some of them are a bit shy. We try to get them to come to Goa, but we will exhibit their work.
Yes.
This is not a question, sir. This is something for the students. Ages back, this is about 30, 40 years back when we were in college, there used to be this attempt to bring people to school, because we didn't have too many teachers then who would arrange stuff for us like this. So as students, we would go out to find people to come and talk to us. So I remember Laurie Becker being brought to school, Achut Kanvande being brought to school, Uttam Jain being brought to school. A lot of people who came and talked then and went. And sometimes you don't realize that what they spoke or what was discussed then, as students, sometimes it doesn't even register. Or it doesn't even seem how important it was what you listened to then. This is one of those occasions. I mean, sitting here listening to him, I have listened to him probably 5, 6, 7 times. I remember calling him to Masa, I think in 2012.
Masa, yes.
In 2012, probably his earliest visits to India then. And continuously been listening to him for so many years now. And every time you listen, there is something new. And there is something fantastic to take away. But what I would urge all of you to remember is that these are very, very rare occasions. I mean, these are not fly-by-night situations where somebody came and spoke and went. I mean, these are things which you will not realize the importance of now. It will hit you some 10, 15 years later. Treasure these moments.
So on that note, we'll conclude the session. So if you want to have more informal discussions, Peter is available on a program called Under the Tree on Thursday at 4:30. It's an informal platform if any students wants to discuss. He'll be interacting with the second years tomorrow, the fourth years on Thursday, and the first years he's going for a sketching trip with them on the Friday.
Now, the late Christopher Benninger, before he passed, he said he wants me to come when I'm older. I've just turned 80, but he wants me when I get older to grow a white beard and to wander around India and sit under trees to teach. He called it a peripatetic teacher. So who knows, you might, you can bring me an apple if you see me, or a banana.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
Thank you all.